Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Great America Show. It's great to have you with us. Well, America's in turmoil right now, whether it be our foreign policy, our electoral integrity, hurricanes rip-roaring through the whole southeast of America. The list goes on and on. We have a border invasion. The Biden-Harris administration letting millions, if not over 20 million illegals into this country, drugs pouring through the southern border, and a stock market that's teetering, that can go any way at any point at any day. We don't even know if we have a president right now. Joe Biden has been missing in action since Kamala Harris stole the presidency from him and the nomination. But America's not the only ones in trouble. China this week suffering the worst stock market fall in 27 years. Now, in some cases, economic downfall leads to war. I want to bring in our guest today. He's Gordon Chang. He's the author of an all-new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. He joins us now. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us today. We spoke about this last time, economic downfall, and sometimes it leading to war. We've seen it here in America multiple times over the course of the last 200 years or so. What does this mean for China?
I think this means that optimism about China, which is, long lasting and around the world, is finally coming to an end. Got to remember that this started because about a week ago, the People's Bank of China, the central bank, announced rate cuts. And analysts around the world, investors said, oh, look, this is stimulus. And they drove up the Chinese markets 24% in a week. Now, this was unprecedented. But what we're seeing is that investors are looking and saying, well, look, what the central bank did really wasn't that significant. And now there's a reversal. The other thing that was interesting, John, is that while the foreigners were pouring in, retail Chinese investors were bailing out. They were using the opportunity to get out of what was clearly a dangerous situation for them. And I think we're going to see the Chinese stock market come back down. It's been one of the worst performers since the middle of 2021. Essentially, about $6.5 trillion of value has been wiped out. A little bit before, about $7 trillion was taken out of the market. So really what we're talking about is a disastrous situation. And I think that the Chinese themselves must be panicking right now because they can see that whatever they're doing isn't working. One more point. Right. Foreign investors, they cheered more state intervention in the Chinese markets. But it was state intervention that caused the problems in the first place. So that stock market rally up 24% in a week, that was always going to reverse itself. I'm just surprised it reversed itself so quickly and so fast.
Now, a market expert of America, neither am I. We go to the guys who make a lot of money for that stuff. But we saw a few weeks ago, or months ago, I should say, what happened in Japan when their currency started to fall and the effect it had on the American markets. I have two questions for you. Number one, they're reporting that it's down to the lowest point in 27 years, right? Is it as low as they're really telling us, or is it worse than they're telling? Is it not as bad as they're telling us? Number one. And number two, will this have an effect on the American markets, or are we immune from it?
Two great questions. I think the Chinese markets are actually worse than they look. And the reason is that there's state intervention, there's state buying. And that has, of course, an effect of rigging the markets in a sense. But it also means something more fundamental. And that is Xi Jinping is renationalizing Chinese companies. So the state stakes are getting larger. That's not good. Now, in the effect on the U.S. markets and elsewhere, because we misunderstand what's going on in China, it will have an effect here because people say, oh my gosh, how can things be that bad? But if we really knew what was going on, not only in the Chinese economy, but also the way the Chinese stock markets work, because they're not real stock markets like we think of them, then I think that people would have a much more balanced view and therefore they wouldn't panic. But they don't. Wall Street just panics. That's the nature of the industry. So yeah, we're going to feel it here and other countries are going to feel it there as well.
Now, what about, for example, we'll take some of these useful idiots, such as Apple, who went over to China and given them, they didn't steal anything. China hasn't stolen a damn thing from us. It's a big misconception people make. We give it to them. What effect does it have on companies like Apple? They're not listed on their markets at all. But What effect will it have on a company like Apple, a company like Microsoft, even a company like Tesla that's extremely dependent on China, their markets, and well, for Tesla, for example, their rare earth minerals?
With regard to Apple, which is vulnerable, I think the markets in the United States and elsewhere have just overestimated Apple's potential in China, because I believe that Apple has a limited time left in that country. And the reason is Xi Jinping is just determined to push out foreign companies.
Right.
He wants to support Huawei, which has become a big phone maker. And so they're doing everything possible to limit Apple's potential there. So I think the American markets have put too much value into Apple because Apple's going to be out of China.
It's interesting you say Huawei. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But it's interesting to say Huawei because 3 or 4 years ago, all we heard was Huawei and the towers they were building and the communications they were building. And we were terrified that it was coming to America. Now you're not really hearing it as much in America. Why is that?
Well, because the Federal Communications Commission, in addition to Congress, has made sure that Huawei's equipment is being ripped out of America's telecom backbone.
Why was it here in the first place?
It shouldn't have been here in the first place for a lot of reasons. There's still some Huawei equipment in rural areas. The FCC has been basically engaged in trench warfare with local telecom operators in rural states. But eventually it will all be taken out. You're absolutely right. It should have never been here in the first place. Huawei is a player in telecoms. Matter of fact, the world's leading player in network equipment because it stole its technology from Cisco and from others. So, yeah, they never should have been here in the first place.
You had mentioned farmland. It's interesting you say that because over the last year or so, we've heard about China coming and buying up farmland across this country. Is there any correlation to that? And it's not just farmland, it's land that's close to military bases. Everything the Chinese do is strategic because they're smarter than us on every front, especially with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris leading this country. Under President Trump, not so much the case, and hopefully after November 5th, it won't be the case. But, is there any correlation to that, to these rural areas having broadband built up by Huawei and farmlands being bought up around the country?
Well, the just correlation is that China is determined to take over the United States. With farmland and ranch land, there are about 3 or 4 things going on. One of them is that there are some purchases which are strategic, I'm sure the Communist Party is directing Chinese companies to buy land near, for instance, Grand Forks Air Force Base. That's Fufeng, the Shandong food processor. And there are some other purchases close to military facilities, which are otherwise inexplicable. But also, there's been purchases of farmland just by the triads, the Chinese gangs. And they use farmland for a number of things, like illegal marijuana grows, which are all over Oklahoma and Maine, for instance. But also in Oklahoma, we're seeing Chinese parties base human trafficking operations on farmland. In Oklahoma, the Chinese build fences around their property. That's not a big deal. Every American in Oklahoma has a fence on their farmland. The difference is that Americans build fences to keep people out. The Chinese are building fences on their farmland to keep people in. That is ominous. They patrol their land with machine guns. This is a really bad story. I mean, this is our country, and we've allowed this to occur. So obviously, we need to get the Chinese out of our farmland, out of our ranch land. If they want to own a condo in Honolulu, I'm not that upset. But I'm really, really upset about farm and ranch land.
And it's not just land, Gordon. And it's not just Huawei. We saw in America this year, in New York, right here in New York City, a shadow police state being run in Chinatown, in Manhattan, right under our very eyes, for years. Now you have the FBI and the CIA and the NSA. Their focus is on spying on Americans who don't do anything wrong. Their focus is on going after school board parents who protest at schools because transgender, and there's no such thing as a transgender. I don't know why I just said that. A man is a man, a woman is a woman, but men participating in women's sports. That's who the FBI is so keen on going after. That's who the NSA and the CIA is so keen on spying on, because these are domestic terrorists in their eyes, obviously not in ours, or mine at least. But we have a police state, Gordon, in this country by the Chinese right under our very eyes. And it's only gotten worse under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Your thoughts?
Yeah. The FBI closed the Chinese police station on East Broadway in Chinatown in New York City. Took them a long time, but they did it. But according to Daily Caller and New York Post reporting, there are either 7 or 9 remaining police stations spread across the country. One, by the way, in Minnesota, which has a governor who is Tim Walz. That's a long story. But the point is, why these operations remain there, I don't know. Because we know that the Ministry of State Security and Chinese consular officials are coercing, intimidating, and blackmailing people who are on our soil legally. They're ethnic Chinese. Some of them are Chinese nationals. Others actually are American citizens. But Beijing has been trying to weaponize blood, quote unquote, as they call it. And we've allowed them to do that. You know, John, I'll say it again. This is our country. Why do we permit this? We know this has been going on. We know that Ministry of State Security agents have been committing crimes on our soil. And we have had presidents who knew this and didn't do anything about it. So, yeah, we should be really angry at the Chinese. We should be more angry at the people we elect to defend ourselves.
Well, Gordon, who did you expect was going to do anything about it? Joe Biden, who was getting 10% as the big guy from his son, Hunter Biden, who was taking trips overseas to Asia on Air Force Two with his father as vice president, as he was in between smoking crack and having prostitutes at his house and making millions of dollars for him and his business partners. And when the whistleblowers came out and said something about it, it was all bets are off, and it was what it was. We got to take a quick break here. When we return, we're talking about Americans and us being the problem. A big one, Mark Cuban, former owner of the Dallas Mavericks, still backing the Chinese, even after all the human rights abuses and the NBA making money on it. I also want to take up Tim Walz and what problem that poses to America if, God forbid, they win on November 5th. We're talking with Gordon Chang. He's the author of the all-new book, Plan Red. We're coming right back. Stay with us. Folks, are you tired of supporting big box stores and multi-billion-dollar corporations that don't support us? Corporations that donate tens of millions of dollars a year to push woke Marxist Dem ideologies? Whether it be Amazon and Jeff Bezos or Target with their transgender clothing for kids, or even Bud Light going totally woke, enough is enough. Why should we as lovers of this country continue to support these corporations? The answer is we shouldn't. I constantly get people who reach out to me and ask, John, what can we do to save this country? Where can we shop and support American-made brands and conservative ideologies? Well, we now have a solution to stop shopping at these woke companies and stop funding the deep state, and a solution to buy American. This is something we can all do right now to kick the deep state in the teeth and stop funding our enemies and vote with our dollars. We have a parallel economy for around 450 household products. Not only can you cancel woke brands like Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson, you can also cancel the stores that carry them. I need you all to head over to switchwithjohn.com, that's switchwithjohn.com, where you can read all about our movement. We have access to a conservative manufacturer that will replace these brands and the stores you buy them from. It isn't an additional budget item because instead of turning right into Target or left into Walmart, you're going to shop directly online, directly with the manufacturer. Folks, this is a patriot movement that is happening right now before our eyes. Every 47 seconds, a shopper is switching to our online store, and we need you to partner with us. Join us and band together. I just canceled my Amazon Prime subscription because I've truly had enough. So what do you say? It's time to put your money where your heart is? Join us today and help save this nation. Go to switchwithjohn.com. That's switchwithjohn.com to learn how you can join thousands of other patriots and help take this nation back. switchwithjohn.com. We'll see you there. We're back. We're talking with Gordon Chang, author of the all-new book, Plan Red. It's available for order now. We encourage you all to go out and buy it. A great read. Gordon, you had brought up Tim Walz, and it scares the hell out of me, the prospect of them winning on November 5th. And I think the only way they win is if they steal it again. But nonetheless, if they win, Tim Walz, I mean, his ties to China, I think, are worse than what we've seen to the likes of Hunter Biden. And Hunter Biden was getting millions of dollars from these people. His business partners were getting millions of dollars. And his father, Joe Biden, the president of the United States, getting millions of dollars. What does it mean for America if Walz and Harris are to win with regards to foreign policy with China?
It means that a communist sympathizer is one heartbeat away from the Oval Office. The Chinese had to pay the Biden family. Tim Walz, they just got him for free because he actually believes this stuff from all that we can tell. From his recent statements, the thing about Tim Walz, first decade of this century, he was taking American high school students, bringing them to China so they could be indoctrinated. That exercise had to have been approved by the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which is the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. Now, Tim Walz can't say, well, I was young and a knucklehead then, because we know from Daily Caller reporting that Tim Walz today, as governor of Minnesota, has had continuous contact with Communist Party front organizations in his state. Right. He's actually appointed essentially a communist agent to a Minnesota government board. And as we just talked about, there is a secret police station run by the Chinese in, I think it's Minneapolis, but I know it's in Minnesota. So I think Tim Walz has an obligation to tell the American people about his ties. We know that he's lied about them, and clearly he needs to come clean, because this guy could be president of the United States. He could be a communist agent as president, and we need to hear from him what happened, because clearly from what we know right now, it is deeply, deeply suspicious.
And that's just further down the rabbit hole, Gordon, of Americans being the problem, we being the problem, not you or I, but these people. I said Mark Cuban before. Another one. I just want to go off on a little tangent here because it blows my mind. I was watching tennis the other day, and they're over in, nonetheless, they're in Wuhan, playing an ATP tour in Wuhan, China. Why these professional organizations, the MLB, the NBA, anybody who does licensing agreements, brings business over there, what are these people doing? The Chinese killed millions of Americans, over 1 million Americans, and millions across the world. Essentially got away with it. We know that it didn't come from the wet market, the China virus. We know it's a man-made disease. We knew it was a man-made disease back then. Yet they got off scot-free with it. Trump, unfortunately had to leave office after January of 21, which then brought in Joe Biden, who was a big tough guy talking. But when push came to shove, he did absolutely nothing about it. China has gotten off scot-free for killing millions of people and causing billions and trillions of dollars worth of damage economically to America and the world. How are they getting away with this?
They're getting away with it because Joe Biden is president. President Trump understood something, and that was the World Health Organization was in China's pocket, and the WHO actually helped China spread a narrative that senior WHO doctors knew was false. That narrative was that SARS-CoV-2, the pathogen that causes COVID-19, was not readily transmissible human to human.
Right.
In January of 2020, a critical month regarding spread of this disease, the WHO had a statement that the disease was not readily transmissible, and there was a tweet from the Director General of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, to the same effect. Senior WHO doctors who were involved in looking at communicable diseases, especially viruses, knew that those statement and that tweet were false. So President Trump took us out of the WHO. What did Joe Biden do? I think it was his first day in office. If it wasn't, it was just like the second day. He put us back into the WHO. And that was just wrong. And the reason why it was wrong was because we know that the Chinese regime deliberately spread this disease beyond its borders. They lied about contagiousness. And while they were locking down their own country, they were pressuring others, including the United States, to take arrivals from China without travel restrictions or quarantines. You put those two things together, John, and it means that 7 million people outside of China who died from COVID were murdered. That includes 1.2 million Americans, according to Johns Hopkins. And yes, we can argue about the number of people that COVID killed, but anything above zero is completely unacceptable.
And I would even argue, and I said this from the beginning, I was one of the first people to get it. I look at it as genocide because we don't know who they released it on. If it was meant for America, it's genocide against the American people. They meant to kill the American people. Now, Xi Jinping doesn't give a damn about his own people. He wouldn't care if he wiped out, half the population, especially if it were women and not military age fighting men. So it didn't matter for him. It didn't make a difference one way or another. But we still have these people in America. I had mentioned Mark Cuban recently saying he's fine with the NBA having ties to China, and he understands there's human rights abuses, but It is what it is. It's just business. Tell the audience, if you will, that the human rights abuses that China, and it's not just the Uyghurs. We often hear the Uyghurs, the Muslim population that China is persecuting and essentially has them enslaved over. But it's Catholics, it's Christians, it's monks. I spoke to somebody on the show recently who lived in China for 6 months, and he said the abuses and disgusting things that was being done against monks and people of any faith in China is just the likes of things we've never seen before. Yet you have Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban's as dumb as he is. He's a smart guy. He knows what's going on. And I think he knows how bad it is, yet he sits there and parades China. And I think he falls in line perfectly with the people he endorsed, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. Your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, you made a critical point, which if I can go back for a second, about genocide. If you look at the definition of genocide in the Genocide Convention of 1948, to which the United States is a partner, a party, yes, what China did with regard to spreading COVID beyond its borders was a genocide because it was targeted on an ethnic group. And the ethnic group was non-Chinese. Yes. So you're absolutely right about that, and we should be making this point every single time. With regard to Mark Cuban, what's going on in China are atrocities. It's genocide against Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Turkic minorities, against Tibetans, and against Mongolians. So there's genocide going on there. Especially in Xinjiang, there's been the detention in concentration camps of somewhere between 1 and 3 million people. Experts argue over the number. But we also know that inside those camps, there is murder, there is torture, there is official rape. We know that there are imprisonment of children. That's because parents, mothers and fathers, have been both imprisoned, and basically they have what they call orphanages, but which resemble prisons. So prisons for minors. You go through all the rest of the things. With Tibetans, essentially the same thing. People of faith. This is occurring all across China. And it's occurring not just against what are considered to be the foreign religions like Christianity. It's also against people of faith of so-called domestic religions like Buddhism. Xi Jinping has no tolerance for faith of any sort. You go through this. This is a system which is responsible for the deaths of tens of millions of Chinese under Mao Zedong, and it's continuing under Xi Jinping in different forms. But nonetheless, this is murder. This is genocide. These are crimes against humanity. And Mark Cuban, if you're listening, you have endorsed atrocities.
I can assure you Mark Cuban's not listening. Mark Cuban, I think, has me blocked on Twitter and every other social media platform. I had the pleasure of meeting him one day outside of a nightclub in Orlando, Florida, and I confronted him because he was with 2 women, neither of which were his wife. Long time ago, but nonetheless, it happened. We're going to take a quick break here, Gordon, and we're coming right back. I want to take up, we could spend hours talking about China, but I want to take up something else that's happening on the other side of that world, and that's North Korea. They're acting up again just in time for the November election. We're going to take that up on the other side of this quick break, and we're also going to take up Gordon's new book, Plan Red. We're coming right back with Gordon Chang. Stay with us.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra MyPillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic MyPillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen-size MyPillow for just $18.88. King size, only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use MyPillows for only $9.88. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size MyPillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
We're back. We're talking with Gordon Chang. He's the author of the all-new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, which we recommend to you all highly. A great read. We're going to get into that in just a few moments, but I want to talk first, Gordon. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and we were talking before the show today, very interesting. the correlation and the friendships, or friendships in air quotes, between Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin. And I'd said to you, the way I look at it is they all have a knife in each other's back halfway in, and they're ready to finish the job at any given point, any slip up. But Kim Jong-un this week sent a letter to Vladimir Putin congratulating him on his work he's doing in Ukraine, and wishing him a happy birthday, which Xi Jinping is not very happy about, because he thought he had a good relationship with Kim Jong-un. They exchanged letters, I think it was 2 months ago, where they wanted to strengthen ties. Puts North Korea in a very peculiar place right now. What's going on there, Gordon?
Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating. Kim Jong-un went to Russia and met Vladimir Putin outside of Vladivostok at a cosmodrome. This was September of last year. And that's where supposedly they stitched together their deal, where the North Koreans would sell artillery shells and ballistic missiles. And in return, they would get technology for missiles and perhaps nuclear weapons. Since that time, North Korea has supplied millions of shells to the Russians. We know that North Korean soldiers have died on the battlefield in Ukraine. So there is a tight connection there. A lot of very smart people in New York and Washington believe that China is really, really, really miffed by this. And to a certain extent they are, but the Chinese also know that neither the Russians nor the North Koreans can go very far. They can't stray out of the Chinese orbit, because both Russia and North Korea depend on China, and it's a critical dependence. So the Chinese are sort of indulgent. They will let the North Koreans mouth off every once in a while. But when the Chinese really want something out of North Korea, they get it. And they get it because prior to September of last year, China accounted for about 95% of North Korea's foreign trade. That's just something that North Korea can't replace.
So who do you think is more loyal to who? Is Kim Jong-un more loyal to Putin? Is he more loyal to Xi? Is Xi more loyal to Kim Jong-un than he is to Vladimir Putin? And it seems like Putin doesn't give a damn who is who, because obviously Putin has no loyalty to anybody, nor do any of them for that matter. But where is the true alliance there? I mean, if push comes to shove and Russia gets in trouble, does China jump on that opportunity? And vice versa. If China gets itself into a little bit of trouble, does Russia decide to start moving to the east towards China?
Great questions. On the basics, China has had a military alliance with North Korea for decades, going back to about 1961. Right. Until June of this year, that was North Korea's only military alliance. Right. And China's only military alliance is with North Korea. In June, Russia and North Korea signed up a comprehensive strategic partnership deal, which is said to have a clause requiring both North Korea and Russia to come to the aid of each other if one of them is attacked. However, when we start to look at this relationship, I think that essentially Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin are pretty much on the same page. And the reason is the Chinese want to disrupt the international system. Yeah. Vladimir Putin has the gall to do it. The Chinese at this point don't. So Vladimir Putin is really important to Beijing because he's accomplishing things that China could not do on its own. So I think that that relationship is a lot stronger than most people give it credit for. And Putin actually, I think, is stronger in the relationship than people think. Because everyone says, oh, Vladimir Putin's the junior partner. Well, yes, he is, but he's not as junior as we Americans think he is. But in terms of...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, in terms of North Korea, the North Koreans have to do what China wants. The bottom line out of all of this is that if China gets involved in some war in East Asia, we should expect both North Korea and Russia to come in on China's side. And the reason is because of Russia's and North Korea's critical reliance on China, neither Vladimir Putin nor Xi Jinping are in a position to say no when Xi Jinping asks, air quotes, when he asks them to come and fight alongside China.
But what, at the end of the day, Gordon, what does North Korea really have to offer that China doesn't already have? I mean, it's a very small country relative. It's on a peninsula that there's nothing really there that I think is useful to either of them, right? Am I wrong?
Well, in terms of material stuff, Yeah, you're right. I mean, North Korea has some coal and some other stuff. But what North Korea provides is it ties down America's forces in the region, ties down South Korea and Japan. And in a wartime situation where China is fighting, you name it, Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, the North Koreans are a valuable military asset because they've got this enormous army and they can do a lot of damage to South Korea. So it's a strategic or a geostrategic advantage. Interesting.
So you mentioned Philippines and all the other places that China wants to dominate the same way Russia wants Ukraine. We now find out that China has got a military base that they've built now in Cambodia, just south of the country, in the region of Thailand and Myanmar, where they've got two, I believe it's two of their amphibian or corvette ships parked there. What's the move there?
Well, China is trying to build what was once called the String of Pearls, which is a series of military bases. And what they want to do is, first of all, they want to control the Indian Ocean. So they have a base in Djibouti, which is their first official offshore military site. But they need to have something between Djibouti and China. And so they're doing two things. One of them is the base in Cambodia, the naval base that you just talked about. Another one is Gwadar, which is in Pakistan, and it's just on the very close to Iran. But Gwadar is an enormous undertaking. It is fragile because it is in a part of Pakistan which is really hostile to the national government in Pakistan. And just a couple days ago, the Baluchs, Baluchistan is the portion of Pakistan I'm talking about. The Baluchs took responsibility for killing a lot of Pakistanis and Chinese in a convoy. So Gwadar is not as safe and secure as the Chinese want it to be. So they need the base in Cambodia, and they're looking for other places as well in order to build that string of pearls.
Interesting. To confuse the audience further, I want to tie in one more country to this, and it's one that we've all been hearing about lately, and it's Iran. Perhaps the largest, I think it is the largest state sponsor of terror in this country, training almost every terror organization that hates America and the rest of the world. The Houthis, the Hezbollah, going after backing people in Gaza, trying to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. They've now got themselves in a little bit of a situation because the Jews in Israel are fighting back. And it looks like they're waging a pretty decent war on Hezbollah, who's been backed by Iran, as I just said. What does this mean for Iran? How does Iran now get itself further into this situation or further out of this situation that they've got? And how does China and Russia tie into it?
Well, the Iranians think they're nobody's proxies, but the Chinese think that they are China's proxy, because Iran could not have afforded to attack Israel last October 7th were it not for Chinese elevated commodity purchases, diplomatic and propaganda support, and weapons support. So it's across the board. The only thing the Chinese aren't doing is providing troops to Iran. Just to give you an example of how close this relationship is, last year, more than 90% of Iran's exports of crude oil went to China. And so that shows you that China is financing the war on Israel. Now, problem for China is, proxy wars can be very clever, but the problem for China right now is that their proxy is not doing too well in their war against Israel. And by the way, one can say almost the same thing about Russia with regard to China. Russia isn't doing very well either, because that also looks like a proxy war. The only place where China's proxy wars seem to be succeeding are North Africa. And that's because we're not contesting what's going on there, but we should. So really what we've got is a China where its proxies aren't doing as well as Beijing first thought they would.
The other issue you mentioned we have is oil, which is how oil and terror and Barack Obama sending a few $1 billion over to Iran is the only income for that hellhole of a country. And I feel terrible for the people that have to live in that country under the leadership of the Ayatollah Khamenei. But oil is where they get their money. And Israel now, in an escalation, may start to soon attack those oil fields and all of their oil that they have, which then poses a threat now for China. Because where is China going to get their oil for? Do you see this becoming an issue for China should Iran go further into this war, and should Israel decide to start hitting them where it really hurts?
Yeah, for the first 8 months of this year, China got 54% of its oil from the Persian Gulf. And it's not just Iran, it's Saudi Arabia, it's Qatar, UAE, Kuwait. And if Israel goes after Iran's oil depots, which it could very well do, then China is going to be in trouble because it could lose almost all of its source of oil, or it could lose more than half of its source of oil. That's going to drive up oil prices, of course, if that happens. This becomes critical because China right now is depending on its factories to pull its economy out of the slumps. And right now, if they don't have oil, they don't have factories.
Interesting, very interesting. I want to turn, before we get to your book, Joe Biden, another useful American idiot, trading the Russian merchant of death for Brittany Griner last year in a prisoner swap to bring back that American hater from Russia who was locked up there for drug possession in the country, is now selling he's a politician now, and he's back to selling arms to the Houthis. I mean, how do we find ourselves, Gordon, in this same situation time and time again where we let these scumbags go and then they're back on the field doing the same exact thing, only to maybe later be caught again and be traded for somebody else?
Yeah, the Biden administration has made it clear that the countries can grab Americans and that we'll deal. And that's exactly what we have done, the Biden administration has done. And what's happened is this has escalated because you have, for instance, Hamas grabbing all of those American hostages as they launched the October 7th war. So they're now going into hostage grabbing on a wholesale scale. And they've been encouraged by the Biden administration. I understand it's a natural impulse for a Democrat president or prime minister in a democratic society to want to try to free people who are grabbed. But the problem is once you start that, then you just encourage more hostage taking. And so the Biden administration is responsible for that. And this was part of a general attitude because they actually encouraged Colonial Pipeline in, I think it was 2021, to pay a ransom to Russian hackers. And that just gives incentives for other people to attack our infrastructure. This is just fundamentally wrong.
And they go back to the term useful idiots, Gordon. I want to take one more quick break here. We're coming right back with Gordon Chang. He's the author of the all-new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. We're going to take it up on the other side of this quick break. A very important new book. We're coming right back with the author, the man himself, Gordon Chang. Stay with us. Folks, are you tired of supporting big box stores and multi-billion-dollar corporations that don't support us? Corporations that donate tens of millions of dollars a year to push woke Marxist dem ideologies? Whether it be Amazon and Jeff Bezos or Target with their transgender clothing for kids, or even Bud Light going totally woke, enough is enough. Why should we as lovers of this country continue to support these corporations? The answer is we shouldn't. I constantly get people who reach out to me and ask, John, what can we do to save this country? Where can we shop and support American-made brands and conservative ideologies? Well, we now have a solution to stop shopping at these woke companies and stop funding the deep state, and a solution to buy American. This is something we can all do right now to kick the deep state in the teeth and stop funding our enemies and vote with our dollars. We have a parallel economy for around 450 household products. Not only can you cancel woke brands like Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson, you can also cancel the stores that carry them. I need you all to head over to switchwithjohn.com, that's switchwithjohn.com, where you can read all about our movement. We have access to a conservative manufacturer that will replace these brands and the stores you buy them from. It isn't an additional budget item because instead of turning right into Target or left into Walmart, you're going to shop directly online, directly with the manufacturer. Folks, this is a patriot movement that is happening right now before our eyes. Every 47 seconds, a shopper is switching to our online store, and we need you to partner with us, join us, and band together. I just canceled my Amazon Prime subscription because I've truly had enough. So what do you say? It's time to put your money where your heart is? Join us today and help save this nation. Go to switchwithjohn.com. That's switchwithjohn.com to learn how you can join thousands of other patriots and help take this nation back. switchwithjohn.com. We'll see you there. We're back. We're talking with Gordon Chang, and as I mentioned, he's the author of the all-new book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. A very important read, and it's available now for purchase on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. A terrific read, a great book from Gordon Chang. And like I said, we encourage you to buy it. Gordon doesn't do these books for fun. He doesn't do them for money. He does it to educate you on what is important in this world and the threats that China poses. So by you going out and buying this book, it supports Gordon and lets him go out and write more books like this. Because like I said to you, Gordon doesn't make millions of dollars writing these books. He doesn't do it for himself. He does it to inform you on what's going on. So Gordon, another new book, The Foreword, written by my best friend who passed away, Lou Dobbs, one of your biggest fans throughout his entire career. And I think you probably say the same about him.
Absolutely.
But preparing for war, what is the most important message you hope to get through in your brand new book here, Gordon?
It's that American elites, American foreign policy specialists, and American leaders fundamentally misunderstand China's assault on our American republic. They think that we can cooperate with China, that things will be okay. But they do not understand that the Communist Party believes that it must destroy our country. Once we understand that, we can defend our country. But until we do that, we are vulnerable because although we're a far stronger society than China, we're actually far stronger than China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea all combined.
Right.
But the point is, we're not defending ourselves. So we can lose our country because we do not understand what is occurring.
The problem is, Gordon, is that we've seen it now for the last, we'll even call it modern times, the last 25 or so years under the Belt and Road Initiative. We've allowed China to get to where they are. We've allowed these people to grow into the devil and continue to push around America. So we can speak until our faces turn blue and our heads explode. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove and our politicians are in bed with these people and our corporations, our Fortune 500 companies are in bed with China and rely on China for everything down to our pharmaceutical needs, where we have 90% of our pharmaceutical needs, maybe even more, coming from China and India. They're the ones, Gordon, who've got us into this situation in the first place. Why would they want to get us out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we're a democracy. And so we allow our enemies to buy our political leaders and our elites. And we know how this is going to end. It's going to end in tragedy. I mean, all we have to do is look at the way we reacted to Osama bin Laden.
Right.
I mean, in 1993, Al-Qaeda reached out and killed 6 Americans in the bombing of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. We didn't pay any attention. We didn't pay any attention until one day where Osama bin Laden killed 2,977 Americans. And then we said, how did this happen? Well, it happened because we did not listen to what Al-Qaeda was saying about us. And the reason I mention all this is because it's exactly the same with China's regime. And clearly, China's regime is so much more powerful than Osama bin Laden ever was.
You mentioned 9/11 and, the just under 3,000 people died. It's more than that. Uncle just passed away a few weeks ago from the repercussions of it and the smoke and all this stuff these people inhaled. And it just goes to show you again, our government knew that we should not be letting our first responders into these areas. They knew within days that the building 7 was covered with asbestos and that none of these people should have been down there in the first place without even masks. They shouldn't have been there with masks. They shouldn't have been at the landfills. Yet we allowed our Americans to go in there and go do this work and clean up. And after knowing that we were killing them, and hundreds and thousands more have died, hundreds and thousands more have paid the price with medical issues for the rest of their life. And we let it go by the wayside. We waited years later to go kill Osama bin Laden. We let that go by the wayside. Like I said, we let COVID now go by the wayside. No repercussions for that. I mean, when is enough enough? When are we going to stop being the doormat, Gordon, for everybody to allow terrorists? I mean, another issue we heard last week, Iranians are planning another assassination attempt on President Trump. There were reports, unconfirmed, but of them maybe sneaking missiles through our southern border. At what point does America stop becoming a damn doormat for these terrible people who want us dead? November
5, I hope. And it's fentanyl. Fentanyl is run by the Communist Party. It's intent to kill Americans. 70 to 75,000 Americans die each year from doses of illegal Chinese fentanyl. And we do not have a political system that recognizes what's going on. Americans are dying. I just don't know how to answer your question, because it is, I fear the answer is great tragedy, that we are going to lose many more Americans before we decide to do something.
Yeah. Fentanyl, I mean, you go to any major city across this country. I was in Vegas this last week. I go to Atlantic City a bunch. You go to Philly. You go anywhere you go, you see these people on the side of the road, and you know they're not on marijuana. You know they're not on cocaine, because the effects on that are relatively normal compared to what these people on fentanyl and these other drugs that come from China. These people turn into zombies. And it's disgusting. And China sits there and laughs. I think there was a call or something, or Xi Jinping was making fun of America, that the Americans have drug problems, but it was all to their creation. I mean, this is what they wanted, and this is what they've got. And our leaders sit here and they sit on their hands to do nothing about it, because I would assume somewhere around 50 to 60% of them are paid off one way or another way, whether it's directly from the CCP or through proxies. How do we get this thing under control? I mean, is it going to come down to a ground war? Is it going to come out to some sort of war for us to finally say enough is enough? We're not going to take it anymore?
Yeah, the answer is what Lou Dobbs has talked about for decades, and that was severing our trade and investment relations with China. And I know that sounds politically unacceptable, but it's absolutely necessary. And it's necessary because China uses every point of contact to take down our society. So until we can manage this, we have to sever those relations. Yes, that is not something the American political system is willing to do. But if we talk about it, maybe we can avoid the tragedy that I so fear.
Well, how do you get the Tim Cooks of the world, the Jamie Dimons of the world, to decouple from this place? I mean, they're so in bed with these people. How do you get these private sectors? I mean, it obviously takes a Donald Trump type figure to come in and do it. But how, on November 6th, when President Trump is the president-elect, what does President Trump do? How does he get these private corporations to get the hell out of there? I mean, I'm glad to see President Trump has now become friends with Elon Musk, because Elon does a shit ton of business over there. And hopefully he can be the trophy figure to say enough, let me pull out of this place. They're bad people. What is it going to take President Trump to do on November 6th with regard to private sector?
I think what's going to happen will be a number of smaller things that will lead to a dynamic that will get American business out. First of all, you got to remember, this is not just pulling American business out. This is also Xi Jinping pushing American business out. So that's one thing that's going to help. But there are a lot of little things that could make huge differences. So, for instance, the Tariff Act of 1930. That prohibits the importation into the United States of goods made with forced or slave labor. Almost all of China's green products are made with such labor. And many other Chinese products that are put together outside of Xinjiang, they are also made with forced labor. We just start enforcing that. We can have a big effect on the Chinese economy, which is really at a knife's edge right now in any place. So there are these things that we can do which could have a disproportionate effect on China.
I agree with you there. But Gordon, at the end of the day, when the American shopper goes to the store and they see they can buy a shirt for $2 that's made in China, or a shirt that's made in America for $5, the American person is going to go and say, well, I can't afford to pay an extra $3. I have a family of 6 people at home that I have to feed. Where do we move that labor to? Because in some cases, Gordon, there's American jobs that just can't be brought back home. And it's things like textiles and stuff like that, which will be overseas because we will never be able to make an ends meet on actually making them and selling them there. And that I understand. But
I have an answer to that one. Actually, the answer is Central America. We have a free trade agreement with the region. It's called CAFTA-DR.
Yes.
And we could unilaterally liberalize its provisions, which would encourage low-end factories to move to Central America. This has a number of effects. One of them is it gets those factories on this side of the Pacific, which means getting the goods into the United States is going to be really cheap.
Right.
Also, it would tend to get people to stay in their home countries instead of migrating up into our southern border. And if you're a climate change fan, I mean, obviously there's a lot less carbon that is needed to get a product out of Costa Rica or, Honduras than it is getting it across the Pacific, which requires a lot of carbon. So any way you look at this is great for us. And so these are things that we can do, which would have that disproportionate effect that I talked about.
It's a brilliant idea. I mean, I say this all the time. 90% of these migrants and illegals that come to this country don't want to come to this country. They want to stay home because they come by themselves. They have families that they send their money back to. If they can just live a normal life, and it's to no doing of their own. And some of these people have very sad lives. They come from poverty. They have absolutely nothing, but they're not allowed to be here. That's the truth of the matter at the end of the day. We all have hearts, but at the end of the day, they're not supposed to be here because we're a country of law and order and law and borders. What I would love to see President Trump do, and we'd heard it floated by Mark Esper in a leaked book, like he was hurting Trump. Trump apparently, reportedly, wanted to blow up the drug factories in Mexico. If we can get Mexico under control and a sustainable country that these people can live in, we will cut down our border numbers, I think, probably 99%. If you can make Mexico a habitable place for their citizens to live in. And then you know what? Mexico is going to have an immigration problem from the countries to the south in Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador and the rest of Venezuela and Colombia and all these other people who want to come up here. But it's not until that time when we do something like this that we're going to see a stop in this. And I'm not convinced that the Democrats, not any one of them in Congress or the Senate or the president for that matter, wants to fix our immigration issue, because then it's an issue they can't run on. If Donald Trump were to fix this issue, I mean, this is an issue George Bush ran on, John McCain, and all that and none of them ever fixed it. Why was it? Why did it take Donald Trump to come in 15, 20 years later and say, we're building a wall? I mean, it's the smartest thing in the wall. You mentioned fences around the properties to keep people in versus keep people out. I mean, it's the dumbest yet smartest idea possible. Gordon, you got the last word here. Once again, I want to recommend the book to you highly, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. It's available on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. This is how we help people like Gordon Chang keep doing the great work that he's doing. Like I said, Gordon doesn't make millions of dollars to write a book, and he doesn't do it for that reason. He does it to inform us all, and he has been doing it long before I was even born. I hate to say that, Gordon. I don't mean to age you, but long before I was even born. But we need more Gordon Changs of the world, and by supporting Gordon in all the work that he does is how you keep Gordon afloat. Gordon, you got the last word here.
I learned from Lou Dobbs, and Lou was a great inspiration to Lydia, my wife, and me. And it is one of the greatest honors of my life to know him. And so, what can I say? I
appreciate that. And like I said, Lou adored you, and you were one of his favorite people, not just on air, but one of his favorite people. He knew how genuine you were. Lou didn't have many friends, and he prided himself on that. But he did consider you one of his good friends, you and Lydia both. And I was glad Lou was able to write these forewords for you and epigraphs for the book before he passed away, because Lou didn't put his name on anything he didn't believe in. Could have paid the guy millions of dollars. Didn't care. It wasn't about money for him either. And that's what makes you and him such good people. And like you said, he taught you a lot. He taught me everything I know. I wouldn't be where I am without Lou. So, Gordon, you're a great American. Again, the book is Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Go buy your copy. Go buy a copy for your friend. Christmas is around the corner. Thanksgiving is around the corner. It's a must read for everybody. Not a long read, which is excellent, but it gets to the point of everything we need to know. Gordon Chang, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate it.
Thanks to Gordon Chang, and thank you all for being with us today. Again, the book is Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. I can't recommend it any higher than I already have. It's a great read. I read it over the weekend, and I encourage you all to grab a copy. Grab a copy for a friend, a family member. It's all you need to know about China and their plan to try to dominate America and the rest of the world. Thank you all for being with us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at John Fawcett NY and on Truth Social at John Fawcett. As I said, we'll see you back here tomorrow. May God bless you. May God bless America. And may God bless the great Lou Dobbs.